At 1:23 a.m. in the morning of April 26, 1986, the world experienced the worst nuclear accident in history. Reactor 4 of the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant exploded. It brought the very idea of nuclear power into question, and within the Soviet Union, the catastrophe left such a deep scar that many regard it as the beginning of the end for the communist regime. Inside the control room of Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, key decisions are unfolding. 26-year-old Leonid Toptonov, a recent university graduate responsible for managing the reactor's output. Alexander Akimov, the shift supervisor, oversees the night's operations. Both are under the command of Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, a harsh and authoritarian man within a rigid and often unforgiving system. Another vital character looms in the background, the newly commissioned Reactor 4 itself, an RBMK-1000, one of the Soviet Union's proudest technological accomplishments. That night, the control room is preparing for a long-delayed safety test. A disagreement brews. Dyatlov insists the test proceed at a dangerously low power level, far below the recommended minimum of 700 megawatts. Instead, he demands the test is carried out at around 200 megawatts, believing it's safer for maintaining cooling water. The power drops quickly, falling to around 30 megawatts, well below safe operating levels. Recovery is difficult and unstable. A mile from the plant is Pripyat, a modern Soviet city built for the workers of the Chernobyl power station. There, Nikolai Fomin, Chernobyl's chief engineer, is sleeping. In a nearby apartment, Lyudmila Ignatenko is being kept awake by her 2-year-old son. From her window, she can see the lights of the nuclear power plant where her husband, Vasily Ignatenko, a firefighter of the Pripyat Fire Brigade, will soon be called to the unimaginable. In the control room, Dyatlov orders power to be increased. Akimov and Toptonov reluctantly comply, raising the control rods. Slowly, the power begins to rise, though still not in a stable range. No one dares to refuse. Jobs in the nuclear industry are prestigious, well-paid, and tied to housing and status. Refusal would mean more than losing a job. It could mean exile to a horrible outpost in Siberia. Leonid Toptonov asks Anatoly Dyatlov to write his orders in a logbook before the test was carried out. Dyatlov refuses, harshly declaring there no need. Despite alarms over water flow and coolant shortages, no one believes a major accident is possible. Even Akimov, who's cautious by nature, considers a disaster impossible. Since the 1960s, rapid nuclear expansion has been important to the Soviet Union. The RBMK reactor was a flawed design, vulnerable to instability at low power levels. Internal documents from 1979 to 1986 warned of these flaws, but were ignored. Director of the plant, Viktor Bryukhanov, and his managers rushed Reactor 4's construction to meet party deadlines. The roof of the reactor was meant to have been built with fireproof materials. These materials were unavailable, so combustible substitutes were used instead. Safety tests, like the one that night, was supposed to be completed before the reactor opened, but they weren't. Unseen beneath the reactor's lid, disaster is building. With only a few control rods partially inserted from the top, a hotspot is forming deep in the core, beyond the reach of sensors. The growing tension inside the reactor mirrors the pressure on Dyatlov. With his reputation in jeopardy and his superior foeman poised for promotion, Dyatlov sees this test as a potential redemption, but his past haunts him. In the 1960s, while installing nuclear reactors in submarines in Siberia, he was linked to a serious incident, one never officially blamed on him, but never forgotten. The test begins. Power to the turbine is cut, simulating a power outage. Diesel generators are set to kick in after 40 seconds. A worker walks across the reactor hall above the core. He witnesses the unimaginable, steam pressure lifting the 350-kilogram heavy caps on the fuel assemblies. At 1:23:40, Akimov hits the AZ-5 emergency shutdown button. Control rods begin to insert, but their graphite tips trigger a sudden surge in power. Within seconds, the reaction intensifies catastrophically. The 500-ton lid is hurled into the air. Oxygen floods the core. A fireball shot into the night, carrying 50 tons of nuclear material, 10 times the radioactive release of Hiroshima. The air has a metallic taste and smell. Radioactive graphite is spread all over the ground of the power plant. Clouds of radioactive dust blow toward Belarus and into the heart of Europe. By morning, KGB cameras document the devastation, footage that would be classified for years. On April 27th, the evacuation of Pripyat begins. 49,000 residents are told to leave for 3 days. They will never return. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone is created. More than 600,000 men and women called liquidators are brought in to contain the disaster. Many work without proper protection, but their heroism prevented a far worse catastrophe. Chernobyl exposed systemic failure and shattered trust in Soviet authority. In the wake of glasnost, conspiracy theories abounded, from KGB plots to alien interventions. But the truth was simpler: a flawed design and human error. The official death toll remains disputed. Around 30 workers and firefighters died from acute radiation poisoning. Thousands more developed thyroid cancer, especially children. Valery Kodymchuk was vaporized at his post. His friend Valery Perevoshenko died 6 weeks later. Akimov died 15 days after the explosion. Toptanov died 3 days after Akimov. Both maintained their innocence to the end. Chief Engineer Nikolai Fomin suffered a mental breakdown and was released early from a 10-year sentence. Anatoly Dyatlov received 390 rem of radiation but survived, dying of heart failure in 1995. He served only 4 years of his sentence. Thanks for watching.